Good day, everybody, and welcome to the Fantasy Roundup here on bet.NOLA.com, brought to you by Caesars Sportsbook. I'm Zach Ewing. That is Spencer, the Guru Urquhart, and we are happy to be here with you on this Tuesday afternoon. It's playoff time, at least in most fantasy football leagues, and it is about that time. Coming to you from home, feeling a little under the weather, so I didn't want to go out and ruin anybody else's Christmas. But I am here. It's an important week. Spencer, it's an important week for you. Let's take some stock because we've been telling everybody you were in 13 leagues this year. How many of them did you make the playoffs in? How many did you get buys? And take some self evaluation here.
Right. Yeah, always good to take inventory and to see where I'm stacking up. I mean, in this many leagues, I always hold myself accountable and stuff. So yeah, I made it in 7. I made it in over half. I was pleased about that. I was hoping for 9 or 10, but I had a few that kind of crumbled down the stretch, unfortunately. But I was close and all. There was only at 2 that were just, kind of stinkers. But anyway, the bye weeks was really good. I had 3 teams get a bye week. Normally it's only 1 or 2, but to have 3, I was really impressed with that, especially considering all the leagues I did get those buys in were very competitive leagues. So it was on that front, it was impressive, I'd say. But yeah, the ones that I didn't make it, just got to do a little better. And then the ones I did, I have a few that are going to be these pressure cooker type matchups this week in week 15. So always fun to dive into those and see how it ends up. It's always fun, always competitive. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it last week. Like, this is the time of year. Last week in some leagues, it was a must win. You had to win to get in. Now, just about in every league, unless you have that bye week, it's must win to go on. And if you lose this round of the playoffs, typically you're out of the money. You're out of the places. You're not in the top 3 or 4. You're not going to get the payoff. And it's frustrating to lose in this week. And so in a lot of ways, this is the week I get the most nervous. I feel like once you make the semis, not that it's house money. Of course, you want to win titles. But to a certain point, there's only so much you can do. You're going to run up against other good teams. And at that point, it's almost a coin flip. Who's healthy? Who has the big weeks, the good matchups, that sort of thing. But this is the week where I get nervous. You got to make it. So to that end, if y'all have any questions or comments for Spencer, let us know in the comments on Facebook, on YouTube. While you're down there, give us a like, give us a subscribe. We are here every Tuesday during the football season. We're going to come back and do some fantasy basketball and fantasy baseball talk as well. But for right now, we're talking fantasy football playoffs. And, the other thing that we've got to talk about as we go on in this hour is COVID. And there were 37 players in the NFL who tested positive for COVID yesterday. There were some more today, some big names. We saw the Rams miss out. If you were waiting on Tyler Higbee last night, you were kind of screwed, honestly, because Tyler Higbee, it was like 3 o'clock. Maybe it was like 2:30 in the afternoon, but it was, less than 5 hours before kickoff. He's got COVID. He's not going to play. Okay, well, your options were pretty limited at that point. I mean, probably Zach Ertz was owned for the Cardinals, and you could go with the Rams backups. But if you were starting Higbee and counting on him to get you some points, I mean, you probably had a 0.
Yeah, it was one of those deals where you would have had to pivot and go with their backup tight end. I forgot his name now. It was a guy I literally never heard of the dude. It was like, who is this? Like, one of these just unknown guys. I looked him up. He was an undrafted free agent, and so it was he got a couple catches. So if all you needed was like 0.5 or 1 point, something like that, he would have gotten the job done for you. You would have had to cut Higbee in the process, but it's not like Higbee's been lighting the world on fire. So if you'd have needed that, I hope you went ahead and did that, because that was Higbee. It sucks, but yeah, he's not worth keeping. He's somebody that he's more of just a streamer.
Not if you just needed points to get in the playoffs, man. At that point, it's desperation mode. You drop who you got to drop and get in, because if you don't do it, you got a 0.
Right.
I mean, what are you even doing this for? So
for sure.
To be sure, and that also illustrates why it's so important to pay attention to the news, to our show, to other shows, to Spencer's column on Friday in the Times-Picayune and the Advocate. If you're not paying attention, you're going to miss something like that, and that's how you end up losing. I mean, and it sucks to lose that way. It sucks to lose anyway, but especially if it's something you feel like was preventable.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's get started, as we always do, with last week's top scorers. We'll start at quarterback. And boy, this was one of the performances of the year, considering Josh Allen sprained his foot late in regulation and then still just kept piling up big plays, trying to will Buffalo to a comeback win over the Bucs. Ended up with 35 fantasy points, which was the highest among any player this week. Tom Brady, of course, he did most of his damage early, but still had 30 plus points. Aaron Rodgers on Sunday night, and then Taysom Hill. And Taysom Hill, we were talking about this offline. He had like a 45-yard touchdown run to kind of ice the game in the last 2 minutes, where he talked about it afterwards. Alvin Kamara talked about it after, like, he should have slid. He should have just, if you get the first down there and slide down, the Saints are kneeling on the ball. Now, it was 30-9. Nobody's going to get, it's not like the Jets were going to score 3 touchdowns in a minute and a half. But ideally, that's what you want to do, because otherwise you could get a defensive player hurt. Something else could happen. You just don't want the game to go on at that point if you're the Saints. And so he talked about afterwards he should have. But the people who didn't mind were fantasy players. And I know you started him in at least one league. I started him in a league. And to get those last 10 points was very helpful. And then Justin Herbert of the Chargers, also a big day, really in the first half, racking up a lot of points against the Giants.
Right. Yeah, a lot of these names are you love to see it type guys. Guys that if you have them, you've been starting them all year and they've done well. Except for Taysom, he's a new kid on the block, but it's good to see him up here. It shows that with his dual threat ability, he's a QB1. He's a guy that if you have him, you got to start him moving forward. Even this week against the Bucs, I think it would be a fairly high-scoring game, and with them keying in on Alvin Kamara like they always do, this should be another week for Taysom to show what he can do on the ground.
Yeah, I think he's a must-start every week unless you happen to have him and Brady or Rodgers or Allen. But he's like a top 6 or 7 quarterback right now, and he's a guy you pretty much got to start because the Saints are relying on him, and he's got that floor, right? He's going to get you. You're not going to bomb out with him because just from rushing yards and the few passing yards he's guaranteed to get, he's going to get 10 points. It's not like he's going to bomb out on you.
Yeah, exactly. He's got that stable floor. Kind of like Jalen Hurts. He reminds me of Jalen Hurts in that regard. He's not a great passer, but he'll run enough for you to where that'll alone give you a floor. And if he does do well as a passer, then you've got a top 5 quarterback.
All right, top scoring running backs of the week, and you will see at the beginning of the week on the Thursday night game, it was Dalvin Cook. And the end of the week on the Monday night game, it was James Conner. So just really a terrific start and end if you had one of those guys. Dalvin Cook, we didn't even think he was going to play. And instead, not only did he play, he went for over 200 yards rushing, a couple of touchdowns. Rashaad Penny, Spencer, I know you said to pick him up last week, and the people who listened to you got paid off handsomely, probably even more than you could have expected, 26.8 points. And then how good is it for Saints fans to see that name at the bottom of the list, Alvin Kamara, back in a big way. His usage was not limited in any way either.
Right. Yeah, AK was back in full force. And, yeah, Penny against the Texans, a great matchup there. And he took full advantage, exceeded my expectations. I was thinking, maybe he'll find the end zone and put up double digits, but over 20 points, like, wow, that surprised me that he did that well. He's a guy that he's trending up, man. He's trending up, and we can probably talk about him again on this week's waiver wire segment because not a whole lot of people rush to grab him, but I think they will after this week.
Yeah, this week, and that's where you got to be. We talk about this all the time. You've got to be a week ahead of the waiver wire. You've got to say, this is the guy who's going to break out. You almost have to kind of tell the future in some ways too. And it's obviously difficult to do that, but that means throwing some darts, and that means, trying to do your research. So
yeah, you got to try to at this point, considering there's just not a whole lot out there. It's better I feel like to try to throw some darts. I mean, it's good to have one handcuff or two, but you don't want a whole bunch of handcuffs. You want to try to throw a few darts for some players that could have some upside to really blow up. And Penny's looks like that guy because there's really no one else in front of him with Chris Carson out injured.
Yeah, and Alex Collins really banged up too, and he has not been effective. And so it's a good situation for Rashaad Penny. And listen, they're not going to play the Texans every week. It's not going to be like that every week, but he is a guy to own. Starting wide receivers or top wide receivers, I should say. A couple of familiar names there at the top: Davante Adams and Cooper Kupp. They have been Cooper Kupp's the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football this year. I think Davante Adams is number 3. He missed a game. I'm not sure who's ahead of him actually. It might be Jamar Chase who's down.
Justin Jefferson is
okay. Justin Jefferson's number 2, another LSU guy. But anyway, Adams and Kupp, even Davante Adams, if you used a first round pick on him, has not disappointed you. He obviously missed the 1 game, but he has been dynamite. He's been over 100 yards 3 straight games. And then the name where, if he was drafted at all, he was drafted late, but he's become one of the true stars of fantasy, especially PPR. That's Hunter Renfrow.
Right. Yeah, he's been really good, and Tyler Lockett's been trending up lately. It's crazy how these trends can go. Guys like when you have guys like Thielen that get hurt, you're like, man, what do I do? But a lot of times you'll have guys like this, like Renfrow, guys like Lockett, T. Higgins been trending up. I know Chase got back in the top 5 this week, which is great to see because I have more Chase shares than Higgins shares. But it just goes to show how at receivers the targets kind of come and go for some guys. I mean, Adams, they're always there. Kupp, they're always there. Guys like Jefferson, but then you got guys. A lot of times with the receiver position, I feel like you got to follow the target trends and see who's got the chemistry. And I usually just say, ride the hot hand. Jalen Waddle, another one like that, to where it's like if you have some of those guys, if they're getting double-digit targets each week, the past week, you gotta stick them in your lineup.
Yeah, and over the next couple of weeks, we'll talk about some lessons that we learned in this fantasy season, overall. But I think one of them for me, and it's like this every year, but listen, you can't get frustrated on September 29th and drop somebody who's talented. Even if they're off to a slow start, you see the hot thing out on the waiver wire. These guys like Tyler Lockett, they tend to come back around and help you by the end of the year. Maybe you bench them, but I would not you don't cut bait on them. You don't trade them at the low point of their value. You don't drop them just because they're struggling a little bit, because typically they come back and they help you in this sort of situation. Tight ends, top scoring tight ends for week 14. Back-to-back titles here for George Kittle. Not quite as big of a week as last week, but 34 points there. We talked about last week, there was only one other tight end all year long who had gone over 30, and George Kittle did it back-to-back weeks. And the other one who did, by the way, was Mark Andrews, who almost did it this week, 28.5. He's had a heck of a season. Then you see it drops off there. Dawson Knox, a guy a lot of people were starting, and then a couple of streaming candidates who paid off. Albert O with the Broncos, shout out to Mizzou, and Austin Hooper of the Browns, who I believe is now on the COVID list. There's a bunch of Browns on the COVID list, but he did have a big week last week.
Yeah, I picked up Hooper in a lot of leagues. I had to pivot with TJ Hawkinson being a late scratch. He was ruled out, I think, on Saturday. I was like, oh, man, what do I do? I was like, I'll go with Hooper and hope he hits. And he did pretty well. The top two, he had Kittle and Andrews, straight fire every week. We need Kelsey to get back up there. He's been struggling.
Yeah, that was my next thought, was I picked Kelsey as a waiver wire value last week. I mean, a DFS value last week, even though his price was pretty high because he usually torches the Raiders, but not this week. And obviously Kansas City torched the Raiders, but just not Travis Kelce. And so that was interesting to see. We'll have to wait and see how that looks forward. Obviously, if you got Kelce, you're starting him and hoping for the best. But it's you don't feel as good as you maybe do normally with him.
Right. Yeah, then to see Albert O in there, that was really surprising. Where's Noah Fant been, man? Noah Fant has been just terrible down the stretch. I was thinking he was going to be a tight end 1 this year, and I don't know, it just hadn't happened for him.
Yeah, no, he's been inconsistent his whole career, and he did have, I think, 4 catches for 51 yards or something. So it's not like he was totally absent from this game, but it was Albert O who had the big catches and had the touchdown, obviously. So speaking of tight ends, Spencer, your fantasy star for the week.
Yeah, George Kittle. I have him in a standard league, so I didn't get the 13 catches, but it didn't matter because he had the big yardage and the touchdown. He still was a star for me in that one. And I think that one, because it's not PPR, you get bonuses for you go over 100 yards, he got a big bonus for that 151-yard game. And he's just been incredible. Second straight week over 30 there. Just it's wild, man. When this dude's healthy, he's on another planet. And at this point, he's seriously given the way Kelsey's been trending down. I'm starting to think heading into next year that Kittle's going to be the overall tight end 1 in drafts.
Wow, quite a proclamation. I mean, the two things you worry about with Kittle, or at least I do, number one is health, right? He's been hurt more than Kelsey has been. Number two is if the 49ers do make a change at quarterback, obviously he's going to get his targets. But is he going to get the same? I mean, Jimmy G loves that dude. Mm-hmm. And part of that might be because Jimmy G struggles a little bit more making the downfield throws. And so if Kittle's open underneath, he's not going to push the ball down the field. He's just going to take the 12 yards. And sometimes Kittle turns 12 into 32. But like that's one thing that concerns me if they bring in some slinger at quarterback. Now, Trey Lance, I don't know that we've seen enough from him to tell. And obviously, listen, Kittle's going to be one of the top guys. The question is, do you rank him above Kelsey? And those are the two small concerns I have. I could have gone a lot of ways with my fantasy star for the week. We talked about Dalvin Cook having just a fantastic Thursday night when we didn't even think he would play because of his shoulder injury. We talked about Josh Allen playing on a sprained foot and just carrying a lot of teams. But I did go with Davante Adams for my fantasy star. His third straight game over 100-plus yards after he missed the game with COVID. He had 10 catches for 121 yards, 2 touchdowns. And the big thing about this was he had like one catch for 11 yards or something with 2 minutes left in the first half, and then just exploded. Caught the long touchdown pass before the half, had a huge second half. I mean, it was just one of those games where the Bears, even though they've got pretty good corners, could not cover this guy.
Right, yeah, he really blew up and just shows that him and Aaron Rodgers, they own the Bears. They have no answers for Rodgers and Adams. I'm sure they tried to double him and stuff. He was just the way he can get open is unbelievable. I mean, I know Kupp's had a great year, and Jefferson and Chase are great, but I still think Adams is probably the best receiver in the NFL. He's just fun to watch, and he can do it all. He's got no weaknesses in his game.
And a lot of rumors, they were talking about a lot during the game Sunday night, that it sounds like it's a lot more likely that he and Rodgers stay in Green Bay than it was at the beginning of the year when, there was some question whether Aaron Rodgers would even play this year for Green Bay. And obviously they're having a big season. They're going to be back in the playoffs. And now they're starting to talk like, hey, maybe this is the place for us and the place where we're going to dominate in our careers. So it's been quite a ride for those guys, and it looks like it may continue. And you're watching the Fantasy Roundup on bet.NOLA.com, brought to you by Caesars Sportsbook. I'd like to invite you to go to NOLA.com/Caesars. You can do it now and get your Caesars Sportsbook app, or you can just download it from the App Store and put in the promo code NOLA1, NOLA1, or from any device. Go to NOLA.com/Caesars. You get that $100 bonus. You help support our program, and you get ready for the launch of mobile betting in Louisiana. Be a late Christmas present for everybody. We'll get to have some fun on our mobile devices here pretty soon. So looking forward to that, and we invite you to do that. You can also drop your questions or comments in the comments section on Facebook or YouTube here, and let us know where you're at in your fantasy playoffs. Did you make it? Did you get the top seed? Are you facing somebody real good? Maybe you're facing a Jonathan Taylor coming off his bye week this week. Maybe you're facing Davante Adams. Maybe Josh Allen carried you to the playoffs like he did for me in one league, and now you're nervous about that foot. We talked about Austin Eckler too, Spencer. You and I both have a combo of Allen and Eckler in a league, which has been very powerful.
Yeah.
But now you get to the playoffs, Eckler's banged up. He's got a mild sprained ankle, and then Allen has the sprained foot. And so you got to have your fingers crossed and knock on wood all week that these guys are actually going to be able to go for you in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thankfully, I have a bye in that league, but still, it's nerve-wracking whenever. And it was crazy. It's a super flex league. I had just dropped Mitch Trubisky. I'd been handcuffed, and it was like, I'm just going to cut him. And then Allen gets banged up. I'm like, what do you know? Well, hopefully it's nothing serious, because that's going to be frustrating. But at least I have 2 other quarterbacks, so it wouldn't be the end of the world. But we'll see how it goes. I can't afford him to go down. They already lost Derrick Henry in that one.
And that's one thing about bye weeks too. It's great to have the bye, because it sure as hell beats being in a playoff game and having guys go out and cost you the season. But you're just sitting there, like you almost don't even want your guys to go off. Like, hey, just stay
Yeah, you wish
healthy.
they'd
Just stay
literally be
healthy.
on bye week. That'd be nice.
Yeah. Save the big games for next week, please, because right now I just need you to stay healthy.
Yes.
Let's talk waiver targets going forward. And I do have a question for you, Spencer, as we'll put up your Week 15 waiver targets here in a second. But if you're in a super flex league, are you picking up Mitch Trubisky? Is it time to start handcuffing people?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'm gonna try to get him back in this money league. I mean, I feel like it's worth it because if something would happen to Allen in that offense, Trubisky would probably be better than like my other option. I have Russell Wilson in my backup is Zach Wilson. I feel like Mitch Trubisky would be just as good or better than Zach Wilson at this point.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair, and I have a league where Trevor Lawrence is my backup, and so it's like, yeah, I mean, listen, if Hill goes out, I'd rather have Mitch Trubisky in there than Trevor Lawrence the way things are trending right now. So
Yeah, and then all the COVID out there right now is scary. I mean, I'm worried that for the championship week, we might have a key guy get COVID, and it's like you're screwed at that point. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but it's worrisome with all these positive tests.
it is going through a spike, and like, again, there's only so much you can do as a fantasy owner. If your best guy gets COVID, sometimes you got to throw your hands up and say, well, it's just not my year because, but like I said, the one thing you don't want is to lose when you feel like there's something you could have done. So pay attention to the news, try to get those backups in your lineup, and just do the best you can. Speaking of that, our waiver wire targets for Week 15, Spencer, Big Ben on your list.
Yeah, I haven't been a Big Ben fan. I've been saying how he's washed up, stay away, but the numbers aren't lying. These past few weeks, he's stepped up and showing that he's still got a little bit left. They're fighting for their playoff lives there. So for those fighting in the fantasy playoffs, I think he's a good streamer for this week against Tennessee. They have a vulnerable pass defense. And then at running back, Rashaad Penny, we talked about him. He's definitely trending up and worth an ad. And at receiver, I have a few guys this week. I went with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I also like KJ Osborne. You might have him, Zach, because I know he's really, really trending up. But St. Brown I put because I feel like St. Brown's a little more under the radar. I feel like he's a guy that people need to know about. I know he's on the Lions, but he's been getting so many targets lately. He's really got chemistry with Jared Goff, who we all know from his Rams days when Jared Goff gets chemistry at a receiver, he'll pepper them with targets. And it seems like St. Brown has finally gotten comfortable in that role and is a guy that should be worth using down the stretch, considering that the Lions they're gonna be garbage time kings, and I think he'll be the biggest beneficiary of that.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about we got to pound the table and tell you guys to listen because Rashaad Penny last week was one of your picks. Russell Gage, who I know you had on your list again this week, he was one of your picks last week. KJ Osborne was one of my picks last week. These guys are in a lot of these are all still out there. Go get them. Go get them if you need help because it might be too late now. But if you're higher up in the waiver order, you do have a chance at them. So, or if you've still got some of those fab left, that if you're in a fab league, this is the time to spend them because, as we said, if you lose this week, it's all over, baby. And there is no next week if you don't. You got to leave it all empty the chamber this week.
Yeah, most definitely. And with a lot of teams out of contention, that gives you more of an opportunity to get these guys. That's probably why their ownership stake hadn't been trending up more because a lot of people, they're mailing it in if they're out of the playoffs. I know it's just out of respect to the teams in the playoffs. If I'm not in the playoffs, I just stay off the waiver wire unless it's like a punishment for the loser.
Yeah, if there's a punishment for a loser, or the other thing you see some leagues do is the 6 teams who don't make the playoffs or the 4, whatever it is, don't make the playoffs. They play their own tournament, and the winner of that tournament gets the number 1 pick next year. So
toilet bowl tournament.
Yeah, if you're playing for something, then yes. But if you're not, stay off the waiver wire and don't be that guy. Don't be a jerk and take away good players from other. But at the same time, don't start dropping players to help people out. Just leave your roster the way it is, and let it be. So.
Mm-hmm.
My waiver wire targets for this week, I went with Gabriel Davis of the Bills. We saw him get some play in that big Bucs shootout on Sunday afternoon. And also Emmanuel Sanders looks like he's going to miss some time. And so Gabriel Davis is going to step into that number 2 receiver role. And the Bills got to win games. I mean, they're down to 7-6 now. They're in legitimate danger of missing the playoffs. And so This is a team that's going to go all out. I think he's going to get a lot of play. He's only owned in 2.5% of leagues. Justin Jackson, this is more of a handcuff if Austin Eckler can't go and you're an Eckler owner. You got to have somebody. Now, Larry Roundtree is also a guy who may get some of those carries for the Chargers. You're not going to replace Austin Eckler with one player, but Justin Jackson probably the closest thing to it. And then Rex Burkhead of the Texans. The Texans have had all sorts of running back problems. Burkhead's supposed to be coming back and, looking pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he's a little more deeper dives, but I really like the Davis pick because with Sanders banged up, he could do well there. Then the running backs is just not much to go after. But Burkhead's more a potential volume guy, and Jackson a potential cuff for like you said, the Eckler people. I'm gonna have to look in to see if he's available in my leagues that I have Eckler.
And also keep an eye on the Dolphins running back situation. I didn't include them because, frankly, there's 3 guys on the COVID list. We don't know who will be back. But if Miles Gaskin's going to be owned everywhere, but if he's not the one who's back, one of those other guys may be available. Ahmed. Now I can't think of the third string guy. Philip Lindsay. And then they also elevated Malcolm Brown from the practice squad this week, and he may get some play. So, depending on how many of those guys are still out Sunday, it's possible that one of these guys, Malcolm Brown's 1% owned, and you might even be able to wait till Saturday to pick him up if you're paying attention to the news. So the Dolphins running back situation, also one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, they get the Jets this week. That's a juicy matchup.
As we saw with the Saints, you can run on the Jets. So you can run and run and run, even if they know it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
You're watching the Fantasy Roundup on bet.nola.com. This is Zach Ewing along with Spencer the Guru Urquhart, and it's playoff time. We wish that you guys are in the playoffs. Hope you are. Hope you're having some success. Drop your comments, drop your questions. Let us know how you're doing and any questions you might have. Of course, if you're not in the playoffs, you can still play DFS. You can still do player props. And to that end, we have a list of some guys we like who are probably listed at under market value in our eyes in the DFS market. Spencer, how about you? What do you have?
Yeah, we got a few here. I'm going to go out on a limb with this Cowboys stack. I know they've been trending down lately, but I feel like they're due to trend back in the right direction. I'm going to go ahead and stack Prescott with Amari Cooper. I think CD Lamb's a little too pricey. I feel like Cooper, though, is still reasonable, very reasonable at 6,400. And Dak's price dropped. I noticed that. He's no longer among the top 5 to 10. He's QB 11 in the main slate there. He's dropped a lot. So I'm thinking that him and Cooper should be able to bounce back with big performances this week against the lowly Giants. And then James Conner at running back. I put him here before. He's not getting enough love, I feel like, on these DFS sites. He's just a touchdown machine week in and week out, and gets a juicy matchup this week against Detroit. I don't care if Chase Edmonds comes back or not. I feel like Conner's a must-start RB1 is a very reasonable value there. And then Dawson Knox at 5,100. No Emmanuel Sanders most likely. I know Davis will be in there, but Knox is just he's a tight end 1, and you don't have to pay the big bucks like you would for like a Kelsey, Kittle, or Andrews.
No, I like that in Connor especially. That guy has been nails. He has been nails, and so it's looking pretty good for him. My DFS values for the week. Keep in mind, DFS this week, you got the regular Thursday night. Then you have a Saturday slate. The 2 games on Saturday: Raiders, Browns, and Colts, Patriots. Really some juicy, obviously Jonathan Taylor's in that matchup. I worry a little bit. The Browns have so many COVID cases. Could that game get delayed to Monday or Tuesday? Could we have one of those that we saw in the 2020 season? So keep an eye out for it. And, if you want to play the Saturday slate, you just got to pay attention to who's in and who's out. I know we talked about Austin Hooper. Jarvis Landry's also out for the Browns. They have 8 positives. Most of them are not skill guys that you'd have in fantasy, but you never know if they have more positive cases tomorrow, which is the problem with an outbreak. Obviously it grows and grows. But I focused on the Sunday slate here. I've got Jalen Hurts 6,600 for the Eagles against the Washington football team. We talked about him briefly earlier in the show. Like, the guy's going to get rushing yards. Washington football team has not guarded opposing quarterbacks very well this year. I just feel like it's a smash spot for Jalen Hurts. Michael Carter, though, this might be the value of all values. He's coming. He's got to come back. He's supposed to come back from IR. They're playing against the Dolphins. The Dolphins have a decent run defense, but Michael Carter, if you remember before he got hurt, the guy was averaging 6 catches a game. He was averaging over 80 yards rushing. I mean, he was a machine. He had become a workhorse. And at 4,700, if he's back with a full workload, that's like a slate winner for you right there. You almost got to have him in the lineup if he's healthy. Also added Alan Lazard of the Packers. He busted out and had a pretty big night on Sunday night. Packers facing the Ravens. Ravens tend to struggle against the slot and the tight ends and things like that. And so I kind of like Lazard here, maybe to keep it going at only 4,000. And then Mike Gesicki of the Dolphins, just a pretty solid guy to have, and at only 5,000.
Yeah, no doubt. I really like the Lazard deep dive there at 4,000 because Randall Cobb's out and he should continue to have opportunities. And with the Packers, Aaron Rodgers playing at an MVP level right now, I think that could be a great value at only 4,000.
I did want to ask you, Dak Prescott, obviously slumping. His value has gone down, as you noted. Is he still hurt? Is it still a calf injury? Do you expect him to bounce back? What are you doing if you have Dak and, let's say, I don't know, Carson Wentz or Taysom Hill in your league? Who are you starting this week?
Yeah, I'm thinking Dak will bounce back. Definitely starting him over Carson Wentz as Wentz goes against New England. I don't want no part of that matchup. Where Taysom Hill, though, that's tough. That's tough because Taysom Hill has the rushing upside. I feel good about Dak, though, this week. For this week, as Taysom against Tampa might run into some trouble, I'd probably lean Dak, but it's very close.
I guess maybe a better way to frame that question is Dak in your top 10 quarterbacks for this week?
Yeah, I like the matchup. Yeah, I think he's top 10. That's why I put him on my values because I feel like DraftKings adjusted and dropped his price since he struggled recently. But a lot of times that's the time to buy whenever you buy low, sell high, and he's low right now. It's like the lowest I've ever seen him price this year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, if he's still hurt, that's one thing. I think at some point maybe the Cowboys, if they continue to win, they may let's say they continue to win, they got the division locked up, but not the first round bye. I think there's a chance he rests at some point this year. I'm not certain he's 100%, but it's also true what you said. I mean, he could bounce back and have a big week. The Giants are certainly ripe for that, as we saw with Justin Herbert this week. You can throw on that team. Our Week 15 sleepers, these are guys who we think are a little bit buried under the radar, whether it's for DFS, whether it's to dust them off your bench and put them in the starting lineup if you have an injury. Maybe it's to go onto the waiver wire, see if they're available. Spencer, Davante Parker of the Dolphins, when healthy, he's been pretty effective.
Right, and he gets not enough credit because he's been very injured, I'll admit that, but he's been very productive on a per-game basis, a lot more productive than people give him credit for. I know all the talk right now is about Jalen Waddle as far as the Dolphins, and rightfully so. He's a stud, but Parker is somebody that, when healthy, he's a solid flex with upside, and he's got a great matchup this week against the Jets. I mean, we all know the Jets, they can move the ball on them, so I'm thinking that Parker is a good plug and play this week. As long as he stays healthy, he's almost, I don't want to say must start, but he's definitely for 12 team leagues or more, he's basically a must start in this matchup, I feel like.
I went with Mercedes Lewis, the Packers tight end, with Robert Tonyan out injured. They've kind of been splitting snaps between Lewis and Josiah DeGuara. Lewis, if you look at the snap count, has been getting a little as time has gone by, and he had a nice day, 4 catches for 51 yards on Sunday night. The Ravens, as I mentioned earlier, I believe they're 29th in the league in terms of giving up points to tight ends, and so that may be there. Again, it's a sleeper, but if you're looking for a tight end, and a lot of people are picked up, or you're looking for a cheap option in DFS, I think Mercedes Lewis could be one to not sleep on, as they say.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, because the Ravens struggle against tight ends. I probably wouldn't have the guts to do it. I just have trouble trusting Green Bay tight ends. But I guess if the league's deep enough, you never know.
If Tyler Higbee was your guy, or you've got an injury or a COVID situation, that you've got to be ready to have guys to pivot to. And that's, I mean, pay attention to game times. The Sunday night game is Saints Bucks. Okay, so if one of my guys goes out Sunday morning, can I get a Sunday afternoon, a Sunday night guy, and still have time to put him in, right? And that's sort of the game you've got to play right now.
Right.
If you've got
Yeah.
questions, and I should say the Monday night game is Vikings and Bears, and so lots of options there too. If you're looking for somebody to fill in, there's some fantasy options, especially on the Vikings, but the Bears have some guys who probably aren't owned in every league, and if you need to pick somebody up for a Monday night and have him ready to plug in, the Bears do have some options. Spencer, any questions you got this week? If you do have a question, you can go to Twitter or Instagram and ask Spencer at Spencer the Guru. Anything you got this week as far as waiver wire pickups or playoff advice?
Oh, yeah. Well, I had a question actually from a follower on Instagram. I could throw it in. He has Josh Allen, but he's concerned about his health and playing in the Buffalo weather. So he is wondering if he should pivot and go with either Tua against the Jets or Jimmy G against the Falcons.
What say you?
Yeah, I told him I'd still start Allen, assuming he plays, of course. I mean, if that foot is healthy, I mean, as long as he plays, I feel like you got to start Allen. He's just too elite not to start. He does it all. He had over 100 yards rushing last week and a big day through the air. He's been the top fantasy quarterback this year. I mean, you can't sit him for guys that are. I mean, yeah, they have good matchups, but they're not anywhere close as far as the amount of upside.
Yeah, and I mean, it is a weather situation, it's an injury situation. The Panthers defense, and they're not a very good team, but their defense has actually been fine. And then next week they got New England again, and so there's not easy matchups for Josh Allen here in the playoffs. But you got to kind of dance with the one who brung you, and Josh Allen, he's the one who got you to the playoffs. If he's playing, I mean, look, he was banged up the fourth quarter and overtime of that game against the Bucs, and that's when he played his best. And the Bills have to get wins. And so maybe he's limited a little bit, but I still think he's probably the guy to go with between those options, unless you've got, another top 8 option like a Taysom Hill or a Jalen Hurts to plug in there, and maybe you feel better about that. But if you're going down toward the 10, 12, 15 top quarterbacks, then Allen's your guy, assuming he's playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had another one about it was a handcuff question. Who would you rather keep as a handcuff, Ingram for Kamara or Ronald Jones for Fournette?
Interesting question there. What'd you say to him?
I told him Ingram because I felt like if something would happen to Kamara, hopefully not, but if so, Ingram would be the sole primary back. Where like if something would happen to Fournette, I feel like it'd be a committee with Rojo and Giovanni Bernard. Neither one would be very good.
Yeah, and I mean, Rojo is interesting because he kind of fell out of that committee. I mean, that was a full-on committee last year with Rojo and Fournette, and it seems like Fournette's kind of beat him out for the top job, and it just makes you wonder, what are the Bucs seeing from Ronald Jones in practice that they don't like to where you're right, maybe they obviously get more carries if Fournette went out, but if you have to choose between the two, Ingram is probably your guy. Although it's fair to say that when Kamara was not in, it wasn't like Ingram was going gangbusters either. So it's interesting. I mean, you just got to hope that your starters stay healthy, both from injuries and from COVID this year. So good luck to everybody out there. Spencer, any last minute advice as we get into the do or die time of fantasy football?
Yeah, I would say just stay rational, stay calm. Don't make any crazy decisions. Don't sit a guy like Josh Allen and panic because of the weather. Don't sit somebody that's a little bit Austin Eckler, like if he's a little banged up. Guys like that, you gotta start them. Just stay calm. It's all good. Just treat it like any other week. Don't let the playoffs thing make it to where you make a bunch of rash decisions. Go with the guys that got you there for the most part. If you have to pivot due to COVID or injury, of course, you got to do what you got to do. But if you can, try and stick with your core players and also keep up with the trends. Don't ignore the trends. If you see like a Tyler Lockett type is Hunter Renfrow, they've been getting a ton of targets. You can't ignore that. You got to start them. But yeah, just do what you normally do. Don't treat it like don't let the moment get to you, like they say in real life sports. Don't Don't let the moment overtake you.
Spencer says stay level-headed in the playoffs. I agree. Make the right decisions. You don't always know what they're going to be, but you can do your research and come up with what you think is the best. And if you do that, sleep easy. It's not always going to work out. I mean, listen, we sit here and follow this stuff for a living, and you're not always going to get it right. You can't be inside the heads of those NFL coaches and know who's going to get the usage. You can't always, you can never predict the injuries, and especially not the COVID this year. Like, you just don't know when that stuff is going to strike. So do your research, make the most logical decision, and go from there. Mm-hmm. So that's what we got for you. Fantasy playoffs this week. Good luck to you. We'll be back next Tuesday with our pre-Christmas edition. Hopefully, a lot of you will be in the semifinals or even your final with us if your league is running a week early. And we will talk to you then. For Spencer the Guru Urquhart, this has been the Fantasy Roundup on bet.NOLA.com, brought to you by Caesars Sportsbook. I'm Zach Ewing. Have a good day.